Hello, I'm Jerry Purser with the University of Alaska's Cooperative Extension Service, and this video is about a cropping system that utilizes plastic mulch and row covers for vegetable production in Alaska. The research that we've done shows that by utilizing plastic mulch and row covers, we can warm up the season in the spring of the year, especially in the latter part of April, the first part of May. We can warm up our soil about 6 to 8 degrees Fahrenheit, which makes a tremendous difference in the yields that we can get from various vegetable crops. We've also found that there's some other benefits, such as our produce is grown on a clean surface. The plastic mulch allows us to keep the produce away from the soil and the mud that we usually have to contend with. We have greatly increased yields. We can get 4 to 5 times the yield of vegetables that's produced under this system. We get much better utilization of our water and fertilizers. We're able to control weeds and also get better utilization of our water through irrigation with trickle irrigation. Although a wide selection of crops can be grown in Alaska using plastic mulch, perhaps the greatest benefit is producing the warm season crops, such as cucumbers, sweet corn, pumpkins, and beans. We have 3 basic plastic mulch types that we can work with in Alaska. The first one being the black plastic mulch. This was the material that we first worked with when we started working with plastic mulch. We get excellent weed control with this material, but unfortunately it does not warm the soil. And the research that we've done, we found that we can warm the soil an additional 6 to 8 degrees Fahrenheit if we put this clear plastic mulch on the soil surface. The one drawback that clear plastic mulch has is the fact that the light can penetrate this material so that weeds can germinate and grow underneath the plastic mulch. In recent years, there's a new material that's come out on the market that's called photoselective mulch. This is a material that combines the benefits of both the clear and the black plastic mulch. We are able to warm the soil like we are under the clear mulch, but we get weed control with this mulch like we do with the black plastic mulch. We feel that the photoselective mulch is the best choice for our Alaska growers. Once we have the plastic mulch laid on the surface of the soil, the second part of our system involves the use of row covers. And by row covers, we're talking about plastic material or some other type of floating row cover that is supported by wire hoops that creates a kind of a miniature greenhouse effect here so that we're able to warm the soil a little bit more and to provide some protection from wind and insects. For our row covers, we basically have 3 choices to choose from. The first is a solid clear material like I'm holding here. If we use the solid material, it will have to be mechanically ventilated some way, and that's usually done by splitting the plastic along the top of the tunnel itself and supporting each side with clothespins. The material that we've been using in our research plots is a clear perforated material like this that I'm holding in my hand, and the advantage of this material is that we get good ventilation. It does not require the use of the safety pins or the manual labor that is required in constantly raising and lowering the solid materials. The third choice that we have for row covers is a material like this floating row cover that I'm holding in my hand here, and the benefit of this material is that it's porous and will allow air and water to flow through this. So if you don't have trickle irrigation underneath your plastic material, you can use these materials here and provide water from an external source. The thing that's really good about this material is it provides excellent insect control. If you're producing warm season crops like cucumbers, and soil temperature really gets to be an important factor. One of the things that we found in our research is that you can incorporate a raised bed with your plastic mulch and tunnels and increase the soil temperature an additional 2 to 3 degrees Fahrenheit. There are several different ways to make raised beds. If it's a commercial operation, there are special bed forming attachments that you can attach to a farm tractor that will make raised beds. But if you're a home gardener, probably the easiest way that I found to make raised beds is with a rototiller that has a bed forming attachment that will allow us to make our raised beds. In working with Preston Pyra, our farmer cooperator, one of the first things we determined that needed to be done was the collection of a soil sample. The results of the sample will tell us what analysis and amount of fertilizer to apply. Okay, we've got the results back from our soil sample now, and the fertilizer's been applied and we're ready to go to work. Preston, what kind of fertilizer did you add to this field?
We came in with 2,200 pounds of 10-20-20, and we disked it. Then we applied the fertilizer and incorporated the fertilizer with a rototiller, and then we cultipacked it to keep the soil from blowing away.
Okay, so I think I figured that out, and that comes to about 1,300 pounds per acre. There's not quite 2 acres in this field here. We feel like that whether it's a home garden or a commercial field, that we need to have some kind of a plan, and this is just a kind of a sketch of the field that you see behind us here today, and just to give you an idea of some of the crops that are going to be grown here this year. We're going to grow some sweet corn, bush beans, cucumbers, zucchini, squash. We have pumpkins, about 7 or 8 different varieties of squash, and then we have some kind of specialty crops we're trying here for the first time, and then we have 24 different kinds of herbs that's going to be put into this field. Okay, our next step is after we've seeded our crop, in these first 3 rows we have here, we have sweet corn, and then we have 6 rows of bush beans that have been planted here in this particular field. We've used the photo-selective mulch here that we talked about earlier. We're using a drip irrigation line here that has emitter holes about every 12 inches in the line. That is put down at the same time that the plastic mulch is. This particular machine here has 2 little discs that are located up front here that open up a furrow. We put our roll of mulch here. The 2 row wheels here push it down into the furrow that these discs up in front open up. And then we have 2 discs behind here that will throw dirt up on the mulch to cover it up. So we can put down our drip irrigation line and our plastic mulch all in one pass. So we will go ahead and lay this material, and then when our corn and beans germinate underneath here, they'll start pushing against this plastic, and we can see exactly where that is. Then we'll take a knife and slit that to release the corn and beans so they can grow. So I think what we'll do now is let Preston crank up the tractor, and we'll get a shot of this thing operating. Well, it's been a little while since we've laid our plastic, and you can see that since we did the last portion of our video, we've laid down a few more rows of plastic mulch and have started putting up a few pieces of tunnel material. When we were laying our plastic, we put a drip irrigation line underneath the plastic mulch at the time it was being laid. And the material that we're using is a trickle irrigation tape that's low pressure material. This is about 8 mil in thickness. It has little emitter holes. You're not going to probably be able to see this on the videotape, but about every 8 inches along this line, there's some little tiny holes here that will allow the water to soak in around the transplants. We've tried this for a number of years and found it to be a very good material for use under plastic mulch. Since one of the advantages of using plastic mulch and row covers is earliness, we found that if we will use transplants instead of direct seeding, that we can get a much earlier crop. These transplants that we have here are about what the size that we would like to have. Actually, we wouldn't want them any bigger than this. These transplants that we have in front of us are zucchini transplants. It happens to be blackjack is the variety. You can see these are what they call plug transplants. They work real well. We just punch a hole into the plastic mulch, and we can go ahead and put these into the soil, water them in, and then they're ready to take off and start growing. When we're ready to transplant, and we only have just a few transplants to put out, like in a home garden, what we found works real well is a bulb planter. One that has these serrated edges seems to work a little better, and what you can do is take the bulb planter, and you want to feel for your trickle irrigation line and try to put your hole as close to that as you can, and just take and turn it a half turn, and then we get a nice little plug of soil that will come out like this. We can take one of our transplants, put into the hole here, put a little soil in. You can use some of that you took out if you want. Put this transplant in, and then we'd water this in. But if we've got a commercial operation where we've got a lot of these transplants to put in, then this gets to be kind of a time-consuming affair. So in that case, we would want to use something like this mechanical transplanter that we have here that will allow us to put out a lot of transplants in a relatively short period of time. After we put our plastic mulch on the ground, we've got our drip irrigation underneath here, and then we want to put up our tunnels. And if we've got only a few to do, like in a home garden situation, we can put these up by hand by pushing the wires into the ground about 6 inches on each side. This wire that you see here is a 9-gauge galvanized wire. It's buried about 6 inches on each side, and this makes a little tunnel about 18 to 20 inches above the surface of our plastic. And it's like I say, if we've got just a few of these to do, we can do this by hand and then bury the edges of the plastic with a shovel. And this goes along pretty good if you don't have a lot of rows to do. But if you've got a lot to do in a commercial operation where you're going to be doing several acres or several thousand feet, then it's real nice to have a piece of equipment like this that is a hoop setter and a mechanical mulch layer that will put these tunnels up in a hurry. And when things work right, we can put up several acres of these in a day's time. Well, once we have our transplants in, we've already put our plastic mulch in the field, we have our row covers up, the drip irrigation lines in place. Then we need to be concerned about some watering and additional applications of fertilizer. And one of the things we found is that we put down fertilizer at the time we do our transplanting, but with some of this high production that we get off of some of these crops, we found that if we can supplement with some additional fertilizers, it really helps the overall yield and quality of our produce. So one of the things that we've been using for the last 2 or 3 years is a fertilizer injector system like the one we have here in the background, which has a nurse tank that's located around on the corner of the building here, where we mix up water-soluble fertilizer materials. This material is water-soluble. It's sucked up into the irrigation system and then run out through the irrigation lines out into the field itself. One of the things that we found in doing our research in this particular area with plastic mulch is that if we can warm the temperature of our irrigation water, it seems to help as far as the response we get as far as crop production and yield in the field. And what we've gone to is using storage tanks like the one we have here. This particular tank is a 2,000-gallon tank, and we can increase the temperature of the water here about 16 degrees over what it is when it comes out of the well. We've checked this over a period of 2 or 3 years, and we find that consistently the water temperature as it comes out of the well here on this farm is 38 degrees Fahrenheit. And we can increase our temperature 16 degrees by storing it in a tank like this. And then by running it through the irrigation lines out underneath the plastic through the trickle irrigation, we can increase it a total of about 29 to 30 degrees Fahrenheit, which I feel really gives us a response to the plant, and the fact that we're not dumping that real cold water on our little young transplants. If you have a grade that's great enough, or your tank is stored high enough above the field where you're located, you can actually irrigate with a gravity feed. But where you have a level situation like this, we have to use some kind of a pump, and we have these little small pumps here. They're about 1/4 of a horsepower that we supply the water out into the field for our trickle irrigation line. Keep in mind that this is a low pressure system. It doesn't require a lot of power, and we can actually irrigate about 2 to 2.5 acres of ground using a system like we have with these 2 small pumps. When you're supplying water through a trickle irrigation system under plastic, it's not always real easy to tell when you need to add water. One of the things that we have been using for the last few years that we found real good is a tensiometer. It has a probe that's buried about 4 to 6 inches in the soil here and has a gauge on it that will tell us when we need to add water. Well, as you can see in the background, we have all of our tunnels up now, and there really isn't a whole lot we can do for the next 4 or 5 weeks, except we'll do some watering, irrigating underneath the plastic itself, and we'll have some weeding to do in between the rows. But the fact that we use the photo-selective mulch, we will not have a weed problem underneath the tunnels until we pull them off, and then there'll be a few weeds that we'll have to take care of. But that's all we can do until probably about the first week in July, when hopefully we'll have some produce together. Well, it's now the 13th day of July, and you can see that over the last 2 weeks we've been slowly releasing some of the plants from the tunnels. As the plants have begun to grow and push against the top of the tunnel, we release them, and in some cases we've taken the tunnels completely down. We have now reached to the point that we have a row of pumpkins here that look like they're now ready to be released, and you can see here that the plant is pushing against the side of this plastic. We're beginning to get quite a bit of condensation here, so we need to go ahead and release these plants. And you can see here that there's plenty of foliage here. This plant's been growing under here since it was transplanted along the end of May, and now it'll go ahead and put out the runners, and hopefully we'll have some pumpkins here by the end of the summer. If you use a solid row cover like we have here, then you have to provide for some ventilation in the top of the tunnels as the plants begin to develop and grow. Here we have some eggplant that have begun to poke through the plastic mulch, and obviously we've reached a point to where they can go ahead and be released. When we're growing warm season crops like green beans and sweet corn, instead of removing the row cover, we can simply take a knife and cut a circle, or cut the top of the row cover out and leave a hole about 12 to 14 inches in width. Then the beans and the corn can grow up through this, and we retain the sides of the tunnel, which allows us to trap the sun's radiation and keep as much warmth as we can down on the surface of the soil. Now, when these beans start bearing and the beans get big enough to pick, we'll go ahead and take it down on the beans. But for the sweet corn that we have behind, where we've done the same sort of thing, we will leave the tunnel up until the corn is harvested in the fall. Well, it's now the 23rd day of September, and we had our first killing frost about 2.5 weeks ago. And the last crops that we pulled out of the field was our sweet corn, the winter squash, and the pumpkins. Now I have a sample of one of the pumpkins that was grown here under the plastic this year, just to give you an example of some of the things that you can expect if you use plastic mulch and row covers. And now that it's the end of the season, I think it's real important that we make ourselves kind of a written record of where our successes were, what some of our failures were, so that we'll have these written notes to refer to when we go to plant our next year's crop. One of the last chores that we'll want to do at the end of the season is to remove the plastic mulch from the field. There are some growers that will try to use this mulch for a second year and go ahead and leave it in the field and location, but we found that with our experience that with the accumulation of dirt that you have, the holes that have been punched into this for transplants, and the weathering and cracking that we get during the winter time, it's just not worth it. You can in fact recycle the drip irrigation line that's underneath this plastic, and what we recommend there is that you pull that material out, drain it, and then store it in a dry place. It's also real important to remember that plasticulture is a rapidly changing technology. There's new products, new pieces of equipment, varieties and so forth that are coming out each year, and for continued success it's real important to keep up to date.